The emergency klaxons were still wailing when Ambassador Klex burst through the crystalline doors of the Galactic Council chambers, his amphibian skin shifting from its usual calming blue to what could only be described as existential crisis purple. His webbed hands clutched a datapad so tightly that small stress fractures were appearing along its edges. Council members, Klex began, his voice cracking like a teenager asking someone to prom. We have a situation that makes the Zorbanian plague look like a mild case of space sniffles. The assembled representatives of 47 civilizations turned their various appendages, sensory organs, and consciousness projection devices toward him. Council leader Merin, a dignified gastropod whose species had mastered interstellar travel while humans were still figuring out fire, raised what passed for an eyebrow on her slug-like form. Ambassador Klex, surely you're being dramatic. What could possibly warrant this level of panic? Klex's throat sac inflated and deflated rapidly. Humanity has made contact. They want to establish diplomatic relations. A few council members chuckled, which sounded like a symphony of dying vacuum cleaners across the various species present. And this is cause for alarm because Klex said, consulting his datapad with trembling fingers, according to our xenobiological classification system, humans come from what we've designated as a Class 12 death world. The chuckling stopped immediately. Council leader Min's eye stalks retracted so fast they made an audible popping sound. Impossible, whispered Dr. Vorthen, the Council's chief researcher, whose crystalline body was already dimming with shock. Nothing survives on a Class 12. Our models show that Class 10 worlds are uninhabitable death traps. What could possibly make a world worse than that? Klex cleared his throat. Earth experiences what they call weather. All worlds have atmospheric conditions, Merin pointed out, though her voice had dropped to a nervous whisper. No, you don't understand. They have weather that includes frozen water falling from the sky at terminal velocity, electromagnetic storms that can fry electronics, and something called tornado season, where the atmosphere literally tries to kill everything by spinning really, really fast. The council chamber fell silent, except for the sound of several members frantically rummaging through their emergency medication supplies. The distinctive rattle of nerve-suppressant containers echoed throughout the hall like a percussion section tuning up for the galaxy's most anxious symphony. There's more, Klex continued, apparently determined to emotionally scar every being present. They've sent an ambassador. He'll be here in 6 standard cycles. His name is Jake Thompson, and according to our preliminary scans, he appears to be cheerful. Council leader Merin immediately popped 3 nerve suppressants into what might charitably be called her mouth. A Deathworlder who's cheerful. Great, just fantastic. This is how civilizations end, isn't it? Not with warfare or plague, but with whatever passes for small talk on a world where the planet itself is actively trying to murder everything on it. And with that optimistic thought, the Council began preparing for what would later be recorded in galactic history as the most medically supervised diplomatic meeting in the known universe. Dr. Vorthen had always prided himself on his thoroughness. His species, the Christarch, were known throughout the galaxy for their methodical approach to research and their ability to remain calm under pressure. This reputation was currently being tested by every horrifying fact about Earth that crossed his analysis table. Respected council members, Dr. Vorthen began, his normally pristine crystalline structure flickering with stress patterns that resembled a disco ball having a seizure. So, I have completed our preliminary research on the human homeworld, and I must say, our classification system may need to be updated. Ambassador Klex, who had been stress molting for the past 2 days, looked up from his meditation pod. Updated how? Well, we may need to create a Class 13. The collective intake of breath from the assembled council members sounded like a space station decompressing. Let me walk you through our findings, Dr. Vorthen continued, activating a holographic display that immediately caused half the council to reach for their emergency medication. Earth's surface is 71% covered in a liquid that is mildly corrosive to most known life forms. Humans not only tolerate this, they voluntarily submerge themselves in it for recreation. Recreation? Squeaked Security Chief Grax, a mantis-like being whose species considered a light breeze to be an extreme sport. Yes, they have something called swimming. Sometimes they do this in the corrosive liquid while it's actively trying to drown them with wave action that can reach heights of 30 meters or more. Council leader Marin was now taking nerve suppressants intravenously. Surely they use protective equipment. Often they wear less clothing while swimming than they do for normal activities. The sound of several council members fainting was drowned out by Dr. Vorthen continuing his presentation with the enthusiasm of someone who had clearly been taking performance enhancers. But wait, it gets worse. The planet's magnetic field occasionally reverses, exposing the surface to deadly radiation. The continents literally move around, causing massive seismic events. And the atmosphere contains 21% oxygen, which is so reactive it's practically explosive. How do they deal with all this? Asked Councillor Bleb, a gelatinous being who was currently the consistency of very nervous jello. They appear to consider it normal background conditions. But here's where it gets truly terrifying. Our psychological profiles suggest that humans actively seek out additional danger for something they call fun. Dr. Vorthen's display showed images that would haunt the council members for the rest of their considerably shortened lifespans. Humans throwing themselves from aircraft thousands of meters above the ground, relying on thin fabric to prevent their deaths. Humans climbing vertical rock faces with minimal safety equipment. Humans voluntarily descending into underwater caves, where one wrong turn meant certain death. This can't be real, whispered Ambassador Klex. Oh, but there's more. They keep apex predators as domestic companions. These dogs are descended from pack hunters, and humans allow their young offspring to ride on them. Their young are used as prey? Grax asked, his compound eyes dilating with horror. No, you misunderstand. The predators protect the young humans. The humans have somehow convinced apex predators to love them. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of someone's exoskeleton cracking under stress. There's also the matter of their diet, Dr. Vorthen continued, apparently unaware that he was single-handedly responsible for the highest nerve suppressant consumption in galactic history. They regularly consume compounds that are toxic to most species. Ethanol, capsaicin, caffeine. They appear to enjoy the burning sensation of consuming mild poisons. Why? Mirin asked, though it came out more like a whimper. As far as we can determine, it tastes good. And that was when the council voted unanimously to declare a medical emergency and authorized unlimited access to the pharmaceutical reserves. The following days could only be described as organized chaos, if one were being generous with the term organized. The Galactic Council complex had transformed into something resembling a psychiatric facility preparing for the arrival of their worst nightmare's worst nightmare. Security Chief Grax had installed no fewer than 17 panic rooms throughout the diplomatic wing, each equipped with enough nerve suppressants to tranquilize a small moon. His security briefings had devolved into what could charitably be called controlled hysteria. Listen up, people. Grax announced to his security team, his mandibles clicking so rapidly they sounded like an old Earth typewriter. We're dealing with a being from a world where the rain is acidic, the air is explosive, and the inhabitants think this is just Tuesday. Standard protocols are useless. I want escape routes mapped, medical teams on standby, and for the love of all that's holy in the universe, nobody make any sudden movements. Meanwhile, Ambassador Klex had enrolled in an emergency meditation course taught by the Zenithian monks, a species known for their cosmic-level calmness. Even they seemed concerned about the human situation. Breathe in peace, breathe out terror, chanted Master Zenfin, though his usual serene demeanor was somewhat undermined by the way he kept checking the exits. Remember, Ambassador Klex, this human creature is probably just as nervous about meeting us as we are about meeting him. That's what I'm afraid of, Klex replied, his meditation posture resembling someone bracing for impact. What if he does something humans consider normal, like casual mention of surviving atmospheric catastrophes or wrestling with apex predators? The monastery's meditation gong cracked from the stress vibrations. Then came the news that made everyone reconsider their life choices. The human ambassador had arrived early and was currently in the docking bay, apparently excited to meet everyone. Dr. Vorthen, who had been monitoring the arrival, burst into the council chambers with his crystalline structure flashing emergency colors. "He's here. And council members, I have to tell you something that's either reassuring or absolutely terrifying." "What?" asked Marin, who was now connected to a nerve suppressant IV drip. "He looks completely normal. Pleasant, even. He's smiling." The collective shudder from the council members registered on the station's seismic monitors. "A Deathworlder who's happy to be here," Grax muttered, stress molting so rapidly he was leaving a trail of shed exoskeleton behind him. This is either going to be the best diplomatic meeting in galactic history or the last one anyone remembers. Ambassador Jake Thompson, meanwhile, was in the docking bay examining the architecture and thinking how impressive it was that so many different species could work together. He had brought a selection of Earth snacks as gifts, figuring that food was a universal diplomatic gesture. His briefcase contained beef jerky, some hot sauce, a few energy drinks, and a bottle of wine from his hometown vineyard. "This is going to be great," Jake said to himself, adjusting his tie and checking his presentation notes. At first contact with an entire galactic civilization. Mom's going to be so proud. If he had known that his cheerful optimism was currently causing the largest pharmaceutical emergency in recorded galactic history, he might have been a bit more concerned. But Jake Thompson was, after all, from Earth, where being cheerful in the face of impossible odds was considered standard operating procedure. The stage was set for what would either be the greatest diplomatic success in galactic history or the most medically supervised nervous breakdown ever recorded. The diplomatic meeting room had been modified to accommodate the emergency medical equipment that now lined the walls like some sort of alien intensive care unit. Ambassador Klex sat at the far end of an absurdly long table, connected to a nerve suppressant drip and flanked by two medical technicians whose job was apparently to prevent him from fainting. When Jake Thompson walked in, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. He looked so remarkably normal that it was terrifying. Medium-height brown hair, wearing what appeared to be a standard diplomatic suit, carrying a briefcase, and worst of all, he was smiling like he was genuinely happy to be there. "Good morning, everyone," Jake said cheerfully, his voice carrying the kind of warmth that made half the council members immediately check their medical monitors. "I'm Jake Thompson, and I have to say, this is absolutely incredible. I mean, representatives from 47 different worlds. This is like every science fiction fan's dream come true." Ambassador Klex's throat sack-inflated so rapidly that one of his medical technicians had to adjust his medication dosage. "Mr. Thompson," Klex managed, his voice barely above a whisper, "welcome to the Galactic Council. We hope your journey was survivable." Jake laughed, which caused Security Chief Grax to reach for his sidearm before remembering that weapons were useless against Deathworlders anyway. "Oh, the trip was great. Sure, we had to navigate through a solar storm and deal with some minor asteroid debris, but nothing we couldn't handle. Actually reminded me of my morning commute back home, just with better scenery." Dr. Vorthen's crystalline structure began flashing warning colors. A morning commute that involved solar storms and asteroid debris. What kind of hellscape did humans consider normal transportation? "Speaking of home," Jake continued, apparently oblivious to the growing medical emergency around him, "I brought some gifts, Earth refreshments to share." He opened his briefcase with the enthusiasm of someone presenting treasure, while the assembled aliens watched in horror as if he were opening a container of weaponized plague organisms. "This is some beef jerky from Texas," Jake said, holding up a package that looked suspiciously like preserved organic matter. "And here's some hot sauce from Louisiana. Fair warning, it's got a bit of a kick to it." Ambassador Klex had gone completely pale, which for his species meant he was now the color of space itself. "You brought weapons?" "Weapons?" Jake looked confused. No, this is food." "Well, okay, the hot sauce might be a weapon if you use enough of it, but that's just a joke we have back home." The distinction between weapons and food apparently did not reassure anyone. Council leader Marin was now taking nerve suppressants in pill form because the IV wasn't working fast enough. "Mr. Thompson," she managed. Perhaps you could tell us about your qualifications for this position. Oh, sure, Jake said, settling into his chair with the relaxed confidence of someone who had clearly survived countless Deathworld encounters. Well, I've got a master's in international relations, spent some time in the Peace Corps, worked as a cultural attaché in some pretty challenging environments. You know, the usual stuff for surviving Monday mornings in the diplomatic corps. The phrase surviving Monday mornings caused an immediate spike in medical alerts throughout the room. What kind of world made their weekly temporal transitions into survival scenarios? I have to say, Jake continued, apparently warming to his subject, when I heard about this opportunity, I knew I had to kill for it. I mean, first contact with an entire galactic civilization. This is the chance of a lifetime. Ambassador Klex fainted. Not passed out, not swooned, but fainted with the dramatic flair of someone whose nervous system had finally decided that consciousness was optional. The medical technicians immediately swarmed around him while Jake watched in confusion. Is he okay? Did I say something wrong? I mean, I know my enthusiasm can be a bit much sometimes, but I thought that was pretty standard diplomatic small talk. And that was when Jake Thompson began to realize that this meeting was not going according to anyone's plan. After Ambassador Klex was revived and given what appeared to be enough medication to tranquilize a small spacecraft, Jake decided to try a different approach. Clearly, these beings were nervous about first contact, which was understandable. Maybe some pictures from home would help break the ice. You know what, Jake said, reaching for his personal tablet. Why don't I show you some pictures from Earth? Sometimes visuals help people understand our culture better. The collective sharp intake of breath from the assembled council members sounded like a space station experiencing rapid decompression. But Jake was already swiping through his photo gallery. This is from my vacation last month, he said, turning the tablet toward the council. The image showed Jake hanging from what appeared to be a thin rope thousands of meters above a rocky canyon, grinning like a maniac, a rock climbing in Yosemite. The weather was perfect, just a light UV radiation warning and some minor seismic activity. Dr. Vorthen's crystalline structure began flashing so rapidly he looked like an emergency beacon. You voluntarily suspended yourself above a geological death trap during seismic instability and radiation exposure. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds dangerous, Jake laughed. But the radiation was only UVB, nothing serious. And the earthquakes were just little ones, barely registered on the Richter scale. Security Chief Grax was now making a high-pitched keening sound that his species typically reserved for impending doom scenarios. Oh, and here's one from the beach, Jake continued, apparently misinterpreting their horror as interest. The next image showed him surfing on waves that looked like liquid mountains, 20-foot swells that day. The riptide was incredible, really got the adrenaline pumping. Adrenaline? Whispered Council Leader Menrin. Yeah, you know, the fight or flight response. Humans produce it when we're in exciting situations. Makes everything more fun. The concept of biochemically induced pleasure from life-threatening situations caused several council members to question their understanding of basic biology. Here's my nephew's birthday party, Jake said, swiping to the next photo. The image showed a small human child, maybe 6 years old, riding on the back of what was unmistakably an apex predator while other children played nearby. That's our dog Rex. He's great with kids, 120 pounds of pure muscle and protective instincts. The small humans are used as predator training? Grax asked weakly. What? No, Rex loves kids. He'd die before letting anything happen to them. Dogs are man's best friend. We've been partners for thousands of years. The idea that humans had somehow formed mutually beneficial alliances with predatory species was apparently the final straw for several council members' sanity. Oh, and this is my grandmother, Jake continued, showing a picture of an elderly human woman standing in what appeared to be a garden full of plants that looked suspiciously toxic. She just turned 92. Still grows her own peppers and makes her own hot sauce. Says the capsaicin keeps her young. 92 years. Dr. Vorthen's voice came out as a squeak on a Class 12 Deathworld. Yeah, Grandma's tough as nails. lived through hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, even survived the disco era. Nothing keeps her down. The revelation that humans routinely survived nearly a century on a world that actively tried to kill them caused a complete psychological breakdown among the council members. Several were now openly weeping, which across 47 different species created a sound like a malfunctioning orchestra of despair. "Look," Jake said, finally realizing that something was seriously wrong. "I can see you're all a bit overwhelmed. Maybe I'm coming on too strong? I know humans can be a bit intense sometimes. How about I tone it down a bit?" His offer to tone down his human intensity only made things worse, as it implied that what they had witnessed so far was him being restrained. That was when the full scope of the misunderstanding finally dawned on Jake Thompson, and he began to understand why the Galactic Council had been treating him like a walking natural disaster. "Oh," Jake said, the realization dawning on him like a sunrise over a particularly obvious landscape. "Oh no, you think Earth is dangerous, don't you?" The assembled council members stared at him with the kind of expression typically reserved for someone who had just asked if water was wet while standing in the middle of an ocean. "Dangerous?" Ambassador Klex managed, his voice reaching octaves that his species hadn't used since their evolutionary flight or fight responses were calibrated. "Mr. Thompson, your planet is classified as uninhabitable by every metric we have for supporting complex life." Jake scratched his head, a gesture that caused half the security team to reach for their emergency protocols. "I mean, sure, Earth has its challenges, but we adapt. That's kind of our thing. Humans are pretty good at making the best of whatever situation we're in." Making the best of it? Dr. Vorthan's crystalline structure was now pulsing with what could only be described as existential confusion. "You've turned surviving on a death world into recreational activities." "Well," Jake said thoughtfully, "when you put it that way, I guess we do have a pretty unique perspective on risk management. Look, I can see this has been stressful for everyone. How about we start over? But this time I'll try to be more culturally sensitive." The phrase culturally sensitive from someone whose culture apparently considered extreme sports to be light entertainment caused another wave of medication adjustments throughout the room. And so began the most successful diplomatic disaster in galactic history. Jake Thompson's earnest attempts to downplay human capabilities only served to highlight exactly how extraordinary they were. His casual mention of toning things down became the foundation for an entirely new branch of diplomatic protocol. Within a standard galactic month, the following policies were established. First, all meetings with Deathworlders would require mandatory nerve suppressant distribution and medical staff on standby. This became known as the Thompson Protocol. Second, humans were immediately recruited as the galaxy's premier security consultants, extreme environment specialists, and somehow, paradoxically, vast diplomatic cultural sensitivity advisors. After all, if humans could make a Class 12 death world seem pleasant, they could probably help anyone get along with anyone. Third, Earth snacks became the most regulated substances in galactic space, requiring hazmat certifications and psychological preparation before consumption. Jake himself was appointed as the first human cultural liaison, with a salary that made him wonder if there had been some sort of accounting error, until he realized they were paying him hazard pay for being cheerful. The final policy change was the addition of warning labels to all diplomatic materials involving Deathworld species. Meetings with beings from Class 10 or higher worlds may cause existential dread, questioning of life choices, and sudden appreciation for boring, safe planets. Consult your physician before engaging in cultural exchange. As Jake often told people afterward, it turned out that humanity's greatest diplomatic asset wasn't their intelligence, their technology, or their cultural achievements. It was their ability to make everyone else in the galaxy feel simultaneously impressed and deeply concerned about their own life choices. And somewhere in the galaxy, on planets where the most dangerous weather event was a light breeze and the most extreme sport was competitive philosophy, beings looked up at their perfectly safe skies and wondered what it would be like to live somewhere interesting. But probably not interesting enough to actually visit Earth. They weren't completely insane. After all,